Welcome, everyone. Welcome to OPA Live. This is an event that we organize every season, every equinox and solstice, and it is usually around the time we release our magazine, The Career Astrologer. Usually we speak about upcoming transits and look at important alignments that we would like to speak about. Usually a panel of 4 to 5 astrologers. But this time we wanted to do something a little different with the upcoming Astrology Day. Astrology Day is celebrated on the equinox, March 20 or 21st, depending on the day the sun moves into Aries. And so the purpose of this meeting is to celebrate the different approaches to astrology. So obviously there are more than 4 approaches to astrology. This is just, a glimpse into what astrology provides. And so we asked for a volunteer who is Ursa World. In this case, she was selected from a list of people who wanted to do this exercise. And the important thing is that it is not a competitive panel. So we're not trying to see which system, is better. We're not selling any system, but we're actually showing the different colors of astrology, looking at the modern, the traditional, the Eastern approaches to chart analysis. So we use the same chart, and we hope to demonstrate that basically each system will bring something different, and obviously some of the systems will overlap. We'll talk about similar things because we go back to the same person. So we're very happy to do this exercise, and there were some concerns shared with us, the OPA board, about this being an all-male panel. And which was definitely not something, we did on purpose. And OPA has always empowered women, and the majority of astrologers are women. So we certainly honor our counterparts. Our OPA board is a majority of women, and most of our programs have a great majority of women, and we've had all women panel in the past. So I would really want to emphasize the fact that this was the reason we didn't have women, is that we were very rushed to put this program together, because all the speakers have to submit a written report about their presentation by March 1st. So we barely had 2 weeks, and we basically selected the first astrologers who were available and who could fit the parameters that we needed for this particular exercise. Now, the important thing is that as we move forward, if this exercise is valuable and it's successful, we certainly hope to make more. And one of other complaints and other concerns were that other systems were not represented in this exercise, and people wanted to also showcase different approaches. So we hope that if this is successful, we will have more of these types of panels where we can showcase different types of astrology as a purpose. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for celebrating astrology. Thank you all for studying astrology, and of course supporting OPA in the things we try to do to advance study So I will introduce Ursa. Ursa Worlds is our volunteer for this wonderful opportunity. And I will share the message that Ursa shared with us. Now, one thing I want to describe the parameters. We made sure that none of the panelists worked with Ursa before. So she's not our client. She never got a reading from us before. She's not our student. So it's a fresh and first time chart analysis for the four of us. But Ursa, we asked Ursa to share just a little bit of her background and if she has some questions. And so we all, the panelists, got what she shared, which is, I currently live in Wisconsin. I'm divorced with 3 children and 1 grandchild. I was in the Air Force and then worked for the government for about 20 years. I'm semi-retired and back in school for health and wellness. Will be graduating later this year or early spring. And I also have studied astrology for 20 years. I want to go back to work. I either want to open my own spa or do some kind of work in the community. I've been divorced for a long time and would like a relationship, but I don't know if I should focus on my career or a relationship at this time. Most men I date say I don't have time for them since I study a lot. We share the same concerns. all astrologers are eternal students. Does the universe see a relationship in my future, or should I stay focused on my career? So thank you for sharing that. And this is the chart that we've been working with. And I'm showing here my version of the chart, because the interesting aspect of this exercise is that each person will use a different house system and will put different things on the wheel. So this is just the way I work, and it's going to change with each astrologer. So Ursa was born July 11, 1962 at 2:01 a.m. in Beloit, Wisconsin. Now I'm going to introduce our speakers. We selected the order of analysis randomly when we got together online a few days ago. And I was supposed to go first, but because Theodore is experiencing a power outage in South Africa, and we want to make sure that he has enough juice to do his piece, he's going to go first. So we're going to start with Theo. And now the interesting thing is that we each selected a constellation card. There's a deck called the Constellation deck, which you can find online, and they have cards about the constellation. So each speaker picked a constellation, and so Theo picked Pisces. And interestingly, we are in the sign of Pisces, and Theo is a Pisces, so I guess he deserves to go first. Now, guess what happened next? I picked the constellation of Ursa, Ursa Minor, and so it couldn't be more appropriate. Ursa Minor is also the constellation of the North Star. Polaris is in Ursa Minor. So we're very happy about having a representation of Ursa in our constellations. Our next presenter will be Gemini Brett, who picked the Dolphin constellation. And Gemini shared that the Dolphin is on his own midheaven, and we can never go wrong with dolphins. And Michael picked Auriga, which is the chariot. And so Michael is going to carry us from earth to heaven with the chariot. And the brightest star in the chariot is, I believe, Capella, if I'm not mistaken. And the chariot shares a star with the constellation of Taurus. So the different systems, we're going to start with Theo, who is a Neo-Vedic astrologer. And the wonderful thing about Vedic astrology is the fact that while astrology faded in the West after the Middle Ages, and when science vilified astrology, astrology continued to thrive in the East, and it is part of the mainstream in India and other Asian countries. And so it's a very, very rich tradition, which we are excited to learn about. Following that, Gemini is using a naked eye, a sacred astronomy approach, which we find fascinating because many of us are focused on our computer generated charts, and we forget that there's actually a whole natural system around this. So taking us back to nature, looking at the sky, and looking at the astronomy of astrology is where we can derive meaning for our interpretation. And then Michael is going to bring traditional astrology, which is, going back to the Babylonian and Hellenistic astrology in particular, which was the first system to really create charts as we know them today. And so we're very excited. Michael has done extensive research on this study, and is, I believe, also creating talismans. So all these are completely different systems. They are coming from different time, different regions, and that's what makes astrology so exciting. So as we go through our analysis, each one of us will go for a maximum of 30 minutes. So be prepared for at least a 2.5-hour session. Though we may, some of us may go a little shorter than 30 minutes, but not longer. And you're also going to get the recording, and you are also going to get a short written report of these analyses in the Career Astrologer, which will be published the end of the week with the equinox. So Theo, I will let you share your chart. And
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ursa, for being a willing volunteer for us today. So let me know when my screen comes up on your side.
Got it.
All right. So one of the things I do firstly before I do a consultation is, we have tarot decks, and the divination aspect of what we're doing is also a very strong part of astrology. And it's also a very strong part present in Vedic astrology as well, or Jyotish. And what I do is I pull a random card out from a deck that I have here with cards from the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the sacred texts in the Indian tradition. And it gives me a sense of what I need to be looking at in the chart and what should be important themes or important placements that I need to focus on. And it's a great help like that, as anyone else who does divination in conjunction with astrology knows about as well. So this verse is Vasamsi Jirnani Yatha Vihaya Navani Ghanati Naroparani Tata Sharirani Vihaya Jirnani Anyani Samyati Navani Dehi. And it's basically talking about taking out old and worn out clothes and we're giving them up willingly for new ones. And in a similar way, the individual identity does the same thing with its bodies and its lifetimes and its minds and memories that it takes from life to life. And what stood out to me from this verse was we're talking about clothes, which in Jyotish is primarily a Venus thing, and also Taurus, as well as old and worn out clothes, which is showing me some Saturn aspect or Saturn involvement with the Venus as important to be talking about. Nava Nigrinati also is talking, in a way, Nava means 9. So in the 9th derivative chart, there's also should be a strong connection of Saturn and Venus coming through. And there's other things that are in there, but I'm not going to go into that. Obviously, the talk about the bodies is also a very strong second house theme of providence and sustenance on a material level. And so those are the things I'm going to be looking at when I look at Ursa's chart. So if I pick up Ursa's chart, I'm just trying to move the cameras out of the way here. Okay, is that clear for everyone?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, so firstly, I need to check the name of the client as resonating with the degree of the ascendant, as well as important themes in the chart. And one of the things we do is that we check the sound of the name, the number of syllables in the name, because that has to have a connection to the degree of the ascendant, round about the degree of the ascendant roughly. And in this case, that is true. Between 2 and 4 degrees resonates with her name. And you can see here, oh, by the way, if anyone who's not familiar with this type of chart, this top square here is always Aries. And in an anti-clockwise fashion, we attribute the signs as houses going around the chart. So Ursa here, in this system of astrology, is going to be depicted as represented by Taurus rising, with Mars in Taurus, and Mercury and the Sun in Gemini in the 2nd house, and Rahu, the north node of the moon, in Cancer, Venus in Leo, the moon in Libra, Ketu, the south node of the moon, and Saturn retrograde in the 9th house, and Jupiter retrograde in the 10th house in Aquarius. In Jyotish, there are multiple charts that we use because the birth chart is valid for everyone basically born in that rough 2-hour time frame, depending on the season and latitude that you're born at. But you can see down here, I've got a 9th derivative chart, which is valid for this time frame here, that's indicated above the chart. And this 10th derivative chart called the Dashamsha, which is used to see the details about career specifics. And that chart is valid until 2 minutes past 2, basically, in the morning. So the first things that we do in Vedic astrology usually is to verify the time, because sometimes a minute can make a big difference, can change the chart for career. There are many charts that we look at here. If I just go to the home here, and I'll show you what I mean. Show all charts that are possible. So these are the kind of charts that will be derived from the main birth chart. And they all have their own respective time frames within which they are valid. So whatever I'm going to say here with respect to these divisional or Varga charts, as they are called, these two, the 9th derivative and the 10th derivative, I'll also be looking at the 24th derivative for Ursa, which is to do about her education, just to confirm what she said about what she's studying and when she is likely to graduate or finish that piece of study, because all aspects of the chart should resonate. So she's Taurus rising. One of the main sounds for the sign of Taurus is the sound U. So the sound of U must feature strongly in the name of the person, and indeed it does. That's the first sound in her name, Ursa or Usa, I suppose, from a Vedic point of view. And so then the degree of the ascendant also matches up with her name. So that gives me some confidence and comfort that at least the birth chart is correct. And the range of the ascendant is around 2.5 degrees, and that's all right. We are within that valid sort of time period or frame. Ursa has mentioned that she worked in Air Force and then has worked in government for about 20 years. And I want to confirm that in the chart as well, because part of her question has been about career versus relationship. Now, obviously, we look at the 10th house to see career, but in Jyotish, the 10th house of the birth chart just shows us how you are doing your work. It doesn't necessarily show you what you're doing. So the what and the why and the specifics are going to be seen from the chart for career itself. All right. So, but we can get an idea from the rulers of the 10th house and the rulers of the 10th house in particular. So, as we said in the beginning, that Ursa has a Jupiter in Aquarius in the 10th house, and she loves acquiring knowledge. She loves acquiring, information and learning. And I would assume that she has a somewhat systematic approach to how she's doing her work. The ruler of Aquarius, there are two rulers that are used for Aquarius in the tradition of astrology that I've learned in India. And one of them is Saturn, and the other one is Rahu, the north node of the moon. So if we look at these two planets, or graha, they will tell us more about the career. Saturn is in the 9th house, and it is also ruling the 9th house because the 9th house here is Capricorn. I'm using the English names because it's easier to talk to people about. Okay, so Saturn is in the 9th house, it's ruling the 9th house. So we can tell something about the career here from Saturn itself. First of all, Saturn is with Ketu in the same sign. So the most immediate impact is going to be from Ketu. Ketu rules the up direction. Ketu rules mosquitoes. Ketu indicates small gadgets and like keys and things that you can't see, things that are higher up in general, you know. So we need to qualify what this Ketu is saying. Ketu has permanent aspects from Mars in the chart and from Venus in the chart. Because in Jyotish, the signs have permanent mutual aspects on each other, which force relationships between the signs independent whether the planets want to do that or not. And these are showing circumstantial and environmental factors that are tied together and that always resonate with each other. So Ketu has an impact of Venus on the 4th house, which is one of the things Venus represents in Vedic astrology is vehicles and comforts and things like that. And Mars obviously can also refer to anything martial, such as military. So she was working with a vehicle that was in the Air Force and it was the up direction. That is the career indicated by Saturn. Then we have to go to the ruler of the chart. So what happened next? If we take Rahu, Rahu is a bit weaker in this chart from a career point of view than Saturn. That is why Saturn was the default and the first option that was done. Out of these planets that are connected to Saturn, Ketu, Mars, or Venus, Venus is stronger because it is ruling the ascendant. It is in the 4th house where Venus has directional strength, all right? So the next career would be in the direction of Venus. Venus is in Leo, which is to do with government, is to do with leadership. So some kind of work involving that. And we'll obviously have to look at the career chart to get more details about this. And in the Vimshottari Dasha system, the default period for Venus, at least without modification calculations, the default period for Venus is 20 years. So she has said that she has worked in government for about 20 years, and there you go. So the birth chart seems to be fine. If I look at the career chart, here you see the ascendant is in the sign of Capricorn with the moon in it. So the career chart is telling me, hang on, she's also going to want to do something with the moon. even though the 10th house in this chart, if we follow along the signs in an anti-clockwise direction from the moon, you'll find that the 10th house is going to be Libra. Again, we're coming to Venus as important, specifically for this person who's born in this 9-minute time range, okay? So let's look at the moon and Venus and what they're doing. The moon is also in Vedic astrology another ruler for Taurus. So here you can see the competition. But before we get to the moon, which is ruled by Venus, so you see the power of Venus in this chart is very strong, okay? And hence, because Venus is also indicating career, because from the 4th house, Venus is having a 7th house connection to the 10th house of career. So what does Venus, the ruler of the ascendant, want a lot? From the 4th house, which is about learning and scholarship, Venus wants the 10th house, where Jupiter is sitting. So Venus, representing Ursa in her decision-making capacity for her life, is going to have this seesaw between, I'm looking at my career, I'm working and studying all the time, because the rule of the 10th house is in the 9th house of scholarship as well. But Venus, being Venus, also is saying, well, I also want something about relationship too. Never mind that the ruler of the 7th house, which is Scorpio, is Mars in the ascendant, okay? That is also showing whenever, the decision-making happening between career and relationship. Another way to look at that is that the other ruler of Scorpio, which is the south node Ketu, is with Saturn, the 10th house ruler, in the same sign. So the issue about relationship as well as career drive is also sitting together. So there's multiple ways from which to see and make sense of why this person is asking a question of career and relationship, and they seem to be happening and occupying her mind at the same time. So, so I want to just explain these. I guess because it's Vedic astrology, not many people are familiar. I have to do a little bit more explaining. So forgive me if I sound a bit professorial rather than the normal consultation thing. Most people use the Vimshottari Dasha system. Most Vedic astrologers will do that as a default. However, given her chart indicators and the placement of her moon, we have to use a modification of that called Kshema Vimshottari, which doesn't measure time relative from the star that the moon is resonating with, the constellational reference, but from the 4th star from the moon. Because the mapping of the moon as the flow of time in the mind is also showing us the concept of duality, which is relativity that the person is viewing their life. So in a nutshell, this timing system is showing me the nature of how relativity is happening in the mind of this person, and therefore how they are going to be seeing and manifesting things in their life, and therefore prediction, okay? This timing system on the top here called Narayana Dasha, which is based on the signs and not on the planets, as you can tell here by looking at the box, is telling me basically, well, okay, the moon is telling me what you want and what you want to manifest and where your mind is focused, but what is actually the world giving you? These are two different things. And so we need to find a symbiosis between them to really make a prediction with confidence about something. Because not only does your mind need to be focused on that aspect of life to grab onto it, and therefore predictions make sense, but also the world has to be in a state, and the environment has to be in a state to provide a platform or a container for that manifestation energy or intention that you're setting, which is the focus of the mind. So there's a lot more to go into, obviously, with Vedic astrology, but I'm liking, just to keep things simple here. So what is happening with Ursa at the moment? Why is this happening to her? Why is she coming to us with this question? Well, very recently, Jupiter went into the sidereal sign of Scorpio, which for Ursa is her 7th house in her birth chart, okay? So now we're seeing this Jupiterian influence of saying, and it's the 2nd house from the moon. So there's a focus on finances coming through, there's a focus on relationships, with finances. And by the way, the sort of what you would say, the karma of finances within the context of relationship and family is very important for her in her life. Especially with providence for her children and things like that. These would have been very important events and circumstances for Ursa to have gone through, especially around the age of 50. She would have sort of had realizations about that, I think 6 or 5 years ago, and come out of that, so to speak, matured with those themes and those issues. And now she's in a state where she's looking more for her own edification and things like that. So if we look at the question about the education, which is what you pointed out, please give me an indication of how much time I've got left.
You have about 10 minutes, Theodore.
Okay, great. So in the chart for education, if you just look at the 9th house, the 9th house is Taurus. Well, that's actually her ascendant in the birth chart. So she really identifies strongly with education in that way. This is confirmed by the chart of education, which in this case is valid for only 4 minutes. All right. So, and that it being Taurus, the ruler of Taurus is Venus. Venus is here with Jupiter. And the ruler of the ascendant in the education chart, that's Virgo. The ruler of that is Mercury. Mercury is with Mars. So we would expect that in a Jupiter-Mars or Mars-Jupiter time period, the education would manifest. And indeed, she has entered a Mars period in September 2018. And if you look at the Mars-Jupiter period that she will be in, will be here in February 2020. Is that Mars-Jupiter? Yes. Now, we could also say the Rahu has an impact because that is specifically the other ruler of the ascendant in the education chart. We have to take that into account as well. And Rahu has a very strong connection to both Mars and Mercury. So before we even get to the Jupiter, the Rahu will also try to manifest that for the Mercury. So if we look at the Mars-Rahu period in a little bit more detail, we come to the Mars-Rahu-Jupiter period. Where are we? Mars-Rahu-Venus. Oh, she's in here now. Oh, here we go, Mars-Rahu. Right. So the Mars-Rahu-Jupiter period will be, that's what she's going to get into right now. The Mars-Rahu-Venus period will be October to December 2019. And then the last one, which would be the Mars itself, will be Mars-Rahu-Mars. So either in the Mars-Rahu-Venus from October to December 2019, or the Mars-Rahu-Mars period, basically February 2020, would expect something with education to come through. Now, if I just go back and talk about the career and relationship, yes, relationship is the next one is on the cards, and Mercury is activated in giving that to her. So Mercury and the sign of Gemini, you can see, I'm just shortening the whole delineation. It's coming down to Mercury and Gemini and things that are associated with Mercury in the chart. And you can see that she's entering a Taurus period. She's been in a Libra period for a long time, since I think 2010, something like that, which is her 6th house moon, the other ruler of the ascendant, and the moon is in the ascendant of the career chart. So she may have had a very strong career focus, which is what she's still busy with at the moment. The Libra period, however, does finish in 2020, and she enters into a Taurus period. And in the birth chart, that is where the ruler of the 7th house, Mars, is located. So I would say from 2020, and really I would say from her, her birthday in 2021, if we're looking at both these systems, that is when I would say a relationship, a more serious type of relationship, would be on the cards. She may know somebody right now, and by that time it probably will manifest as something serious. Or she could just meet somebody as those periods manifest, and then quickly it's something serious and she's on about. So my advice to her would be, you are still in the Libra period, focus on your career, that's what you want to do. The moon is coming up very strong in the career chart, and it's in the sign of Capricorn. And it's in the 6th house in the birth chart. So this is strongly a service. This is what she really cares about, because the moon is always going to tell us what we are comfortable to do to exist in this body. It's our mind-body connection, what we feel comfortable with. So I would say that that's something that she can really push with in the interim. And it's maybe not the time and focus for career, for relationship right now, rather. That will be coming from 2021 onwards. Especially when we get to the Mars-Mercury period in 2022, when she's really her mind will really be on that, ready, involved in it. But you can see the world will be giving that to her from November 21 already. So that's basically the summary of it. And that's a little taste of how a Jyotish. And by the way, given the cards we looked at, a Saturn-Venus connection, with the clothes and old clothes, there's Venus here with a very strong connection to Saturn. And in the 9th derivative chart, the Nava chart, Venus and Saturn are together in the sign of Taurus, which is also about the clothes and the body and these things. So the divination aspect and the guidance from the card, all has been used in looking at these indicators for Ursula. So there you go, Ursula. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you very much, Theo. And we learned a lot from Vedic and what you derive from the charts. So we look forward to hearing Ursula's feedback. Ursula will provide feedback once we're all done. So thank you, Theo, from South Africa and under candlelight and prevailing through the circumstantial obstacles. So I will be the Ursa, not Ursula. I will be continuing sharing Ursa's chart. Let me put here. Can you all see the chart?
Yep.
Great. So transitioning from Vedic to my approach to the chart reading is mostly based on evolutionary astrology, which is a system that was developed in the 80s, following the strong psychological approach to astrology that also emerged during that time. So evolutionary astrology is essentially a system that uses the chart to understand the soul journey. And today there are many different ways of using evolutionary astrology. So you will hear other prominent astrologers such as Stephen Forrest or Jeffrey Wolf Green or Patricia Walsh and Lauren Albanian, who will possibly use different interpretation and delineation. But the main focus is to use the whole chart and understand where the soul is coming from past lives. And then what is the person bringing into this life? And what is their next step? And the reason we look at a past life, the reason why it's important is that past life circumstances, if we understand that the soul is evolving, then the whatever we experience in the past will condition the circumstances of this life. So the reason why someone may be going through some challenges, or the reason why someone may have certain gifts from birth will be identified. At least we're going to try to look for it in the chart. So we understand from this perspective that not everything that we experience is genetic. It's not only coming from parental influence or early childhood, but from that soul experience, which is most often a soul that is older than the chronological age we give them in this life. So when we understand this bigger picture perspective, when we see the past and the present and the future from this detached bird eye perspective, we understand the existential questions. We can get to questions such as why I'm here, but then also address very practical questions, whether it's about, should I focus on career or relationship, or when should I sign, the contract. So it's not only about addressing existential question, it also comes down to the practical. Other technicalities, I personally use Koch house systems. I use some of the asteroids, sometimes add Hygeia for health references. Each chart will kind of draw something different for me. Many evolutionary astrologers use porphyry, and I tend to switch from one to the other to see if some planets are changing signs, changing houses in the different system. And in this case, the only planet that changes house is going to be Pluto. In porphyry, Pluto is in the 4th, and in Koch, it's in the 5th. So another thing that's important in evolutionary astrology is that the chart represents a natural design, and it's connected to the higher intelligence of nature, of the cosmos, of the universe. And so there is no chart that is inherently good or bad. There is no placement that is inherently good or bad. There's no success guaranteed, and there's no crisis guaranteed. But of course, some signature will pose a stronger challenge. So what we basically understand is that each signature is a life lesson. And if you understand the lesson, then you can make the best of the aspect. So if someone has very polarized energies, if they are using those energies in the right context, if they're learning why these energies are there and what's the lesson, then they can thrive and can really make the best of the chart. So in a way, we are fated to our chart. We can't change our chart, but we have the free will to make the best use of the chart. So looking at delineation, the way I look at the chart is, first of all, look at the general disposition. I see that many of the planets are in the lower hemisphere, and they are also in low hemisphere signs from Gemini to Scorpio. So this is the chart of someone that, the general impression is that someone who really needs to connect personally with everything that they do. They need to have a personal meaning. They cannot just do things because someone else told them. They're not going to be easy followers. They're going to be more authentically connected to their own rhythms. And they'll need to be emotionally identify with the choices they make. It's not just something that is, again, coming from outside, but it has to really connect with their own inner core at the end of the day. So it's very, this lower hemisphere shows need to connect to my own rhythm. Then we see element distribution, and we see there's very low earth. with the only Earth is Pluto in Virgo. But there is a strong compensation for Earth with a very strong Saturn in the chart, which is, very elevated in the 10th house, and it's tightly conjunct the South Node. So that can give some of the Earth that the person doesn't have otherwise in element distribution. But if we see a low Earth chart, and sorry, the other Earth is the ascendant in Taurus. But generally speaking, when people have a low Earth disposition, there is a tendency to have a life that will be more, the way I like to describe it is taking the scenic view rather than taking the highways. So it's wanting to experiment more and not let practical needs always be, the thing that will determine what I'm going to do. So it's about looking at things from a more artistic point of view, from a more meaning, the search for meaning as opposed to survival and, what I must do versus what I want to do. So we see here again someone, with this low hemisphere and less Earth, someone who needs to again feel emotionally driven and not just do things because there's a practical imperative. But again, coming with Saturn on the top of the chart, she will need to pay attention to external pressure as well. So when I look at this chart, I see some important configuration. I want to look at planets on the angles. Mars is angular in Gemini, and it squares Venus and Uranus. Then the moon is in Scorpio, and it's squaring the MCIC. So even though the moon is not on an angle, it squares an angle, and that to me amplifies the moon as well. So Mars and the moon are going to be very important. And the moon is also conjunct Neptune, square the nodes. So when I look at this Mars angular in Gemini, square Venus and Uranus, I see that this Ursa is going to be someone who needs to take charge of her destiny. She's going to have to rebel. She's going to have to voice, Gemini, assert her voice and speak her truth. And we see that she's going to have to separate from anything that's going to be too confining, anything that, any person who's going to try to control her. We see that this Mars square Uranus Venus angular shows that on the one hand she can follow other people until she's going to hit the wall and is going to say, I quit. I need to do my own thing. I cannot just follow orders, so to speak. And because it squares Venus and Uranus, we also see that there may have been ruptures in her family of origin, possibly parents splitting or parents not getting along. Or it could be that Mars in Gemini, because of her journey or because of a need to travel, Gemini going somewhere, she had to leave a relationship. Venus, Uranus in the fourth. So there's a big dilemma here in this square between needing to address relationship needs versus needing to follow my own truth and do my own thing. Earlier on, this Mars in Gemini can also point to very powerful dynamics with siblings, possibly a separation with a sibling. It can be a physical separation or an emotional separation. And I wonder if there were also perhaps some competition between siblings and a relationship. Like if she has a sister, I don't know, if there was some kind of pressure between the siblings and a relationship because of that Venus square. But in any case, there may have been some tension between favored siblings, a sibling that was perhaps, maybe she was more successful or got along with one of the parents more easily versus another. And so we see this angular Mars, pointing to hinting at these issues and at these lessons. And then the moon in Scorpio in the 6th house points to a need to find a job that will be emotionally satisfying, a job that will have qualities, moon-like qualities, and Scorpio qualities. So a job that requires a lot of introspection, a lot of analysis, emotional as well as technical analysis, and a job that also has a lot to do with confidentiality and keeping things personal. And of course, with Moon Neptune, a job that has therapeutic, possibly therapeutic qualities. So healing, medicine, wellness in general, which is part of her question. So we can definitely see that with the Moon angular in the 6th conjunct Neptune, that the direction of going to something that has to do with wellness and health is very strong here. When we look at the soul journey, we also look at the nodal axis and its rulers. So we see Saturn conjunct the South Node in Aquarius, and the modern ruler, we use modern rulers, Uranus is in Leo, in the 4th house, conjunct Venus. So we see the South Node as where the person is coming from, at least part of the story. And we see here a very advanced mental approach that requires very high standards of performance. So we see here someone who comes from past lives where she was in position of leadership. She was possibly an educator. She worked in communities, in groups. And we also see that there was a lot of interplay between very rational orientation, like sciences and medicine and technology, versus spiritual. Because we see that Neptune squares, and Neptune has to do with the spiritual. So there's a whole challenge here on an evolutionary level to bring spirituality and science together between the Saturn in Aquarius and the Neptune in Scorpio. And to me, this is not only in a career direction, but it's in all her life. And for example, if this affects the 6th house, it may mean that she will need, if she ever has a health crisis, she will need to approach both scientific approaches and alternative, holistic, spiritual approaches. But we see that she comes from past life where she was part of a larger whole. And with the North Node in Leo in the 4th, we see that one of the lessons of this life is to connect to her story, to her origins, and to her ancestry. And we see that this life was very important to have a family and to have children, because this may have been something she neglected to do in a past life, where career and intellect and education and being with friends was more important. So we see that she was not connected to her own ancestry, that she's born into this life, you know, wanting to be part of the friends, the groups, and not so much with her own roots. And we see that now there's a return as she ages and as she learns, there's a return to her own roots. So I would ask her, you know, if she was talking to me, I would ask her, what is her family ancestry from? Where are her parents from? And since today, the nodal axis, I'm going to look at the transits. Just a moment here. We see that currently the North Node is also in Cancer, and it's going to come on her Sun. We see that this can be a great time to continue this and to activate this, to reconnect with her lineage, to do a pilgrimage to her ancestral lands, and you know, reconnect with family, also with her children. So a very, you know, as the transiting node approach her Sun, it's a time for both connecting with her own purpose, her own emotional passion, not just do, you know, what the group wants, what the friend wants, or what the community wants, but what really burns inside of me. And it's also possibly a time where there will be some development with one of her children, because the Sun represents the children. And it may also be a time to reconnect with one of her siblings, because it's in the 3rd house. So it's a very powerful time in her development. And we see basically that with the North Node being in Leo, being in the 4th house, it's all emotional. So it's combining the mental with the rational, with the emotional. And the ruler of the North Node is the Sun, which again is in an emotional sign of Cancer. And so whatever she studies, whatever she does with her life, it needs to be her signature. It needs to be something that makes her happy. Again, not something just, you know, that is going to pay the bills, but something that is making her really involved with what she's doing. And we see overall that there's a lot of focus here on finding who I am and what I really want to do with myself. Now, going back to other measurements, we see that Uranus is going to oppose her moon by transit in the 6th house. So we see that there's going to be changes in her job, and that this can be a very auspicious time to launch something new, because Uranus is important in her chart. It's the ruler of the nodes, and if it aspects the moon, we see a need for an upgrade, a need to do something different. And it's in Taurus, Scorpio, 6th house, 12th house. So I would bring again this holistic approach between science and spirituality, body work, emotional, in body work because of the Taurus, emotional connection. And it's interesting that as she's having her chart read by all these astrologers, the moon is exactly on her North Node. And so she's the center of attention. Looking at her progressions very quickly, Jeff, how am I doing with time? Okay, I'm not.
Sorry, Maurice, you've got about 5 minutes.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
So we look at the progressions. This is solar arc direction. This is also a system I use in predictive techniques. So we look first of all at the natal chart and want to understand the lessons, the spirit, and science, and the whole family emotional stories that I shared. But now we want to look at what is going to be activated. Solar arc look at specific degrees. Every planet moves 1 degree per year. And what we are seeing is that Pluto is right about touching her moon in the 6th house by solar arc. And it's, if we speak of 1 degree per year, it's within 6 months of exact touching. So it's already within orb. So this can be a very important time. Once again, the moon rules her sun, and it's an angular moon, and Pluto is currently squaring her MC. So we see a lot of 6th house changes, which means new job, new changing the way she's been doing things professionally, but it can also impact emotionally. I don't know if her mother is still around, but this can be a time for emotional healing with her mother or with family members. It can also be a time where she needs to be a little cautious with her own health. Take her own wellness and spa treatments before she invests in caring for others, because Moon Neptune people can give a lot and can sacrifice a lot, but they forget to take care of themselves. So this Pluto moon tells her to, reminds her about self-care. And then just a quick note on the progression. We see the progressed moon moving into the 7th house, and it's going to be there for a few years into the 7th and 8th house, but it's going to oppose Mars in 4 months or so. And so even though this moon speaks about relationships and the potential to meet new people, when it's going to impose the Mars, it's going to create a potential doubts about relationships. So someone may come along, but she's not going to feel so sure about it until the moon passes that Mars. And it's going to be eminent. We see that she may meet someone very soon because the moon is going to square Venus in the coming weeks. And, about the question, I would say both relationship and career could work given these alignments. We see a lot of 6th house activity, and we see a lot of 7th house with both transiting Jupiter and progressed moon in the 7th house. Now, to answer your question, with Venus-Uranus, you need a partner who is going to be interested in what you study rather than someone who feels intimidated by what you study. So Mars in Gemini, Venus, Uranus, you need a partner that has, that is advanced intellectually, that can have good conversations with you, and with whom you can have a mental exchange with, as well as an emotional connection. So wishing you all the best, and thank you very much.
So Maurice, I just got a message from Gemini Brett. His internet is really not doing well. He's wondering, he's trying to sort it out. Can Michael go next?
Michael, are you there? You're muted.
I'm here.
You ready to go?
Yes. Okay, let me share the chart.
Oh, no.
Do you see this? Oh, I see
Yes.
Brett is back.
No, just go ahead, Michael.
Okay, I'm going.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'll sort it out. Sorry.
It's okay. All right. So, a couple of general things about the system that I use. Maurice already told you that I base my system on the Hellenistic sources, which is the bedrock of the Western astrological system. But I'm not a very purist in that sense. You know, I use many systems and think that are valid, and I can synthesize. As most of traditional astrologers, I started as a modern astrologer, so I look at the chart from the perspective of a modern astrologer. This is a very simplified chart wheel. I didn't insert many of the Greek lots or things of that sort. I have a small time frame, so I want to keep it a bit lighthearted and simple as much as I can. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Something jumped here. Okay. I'll begin. Maybe just a couple of technical notes. The chart wheel is, you can see the quadrant houses, the Placidus, but I also use the whole sign houses. I'm just a regular, to see that in this way, I don't need to put the 0 of the sign on the ascendant or for that. I do a kind of a hybrid system, which was probably also the way it was done, at least from a couple of sources. So I see a planet in both houses with the different level of expression, but I won't get into the technicalities too much of that. Okay, so and yes, I use the outer planets. I also put Chiron in, and sometimes I also put Lilith, the dark moon, only to see where the moon is in reference to the perigee and apogee. It's not in this chart right now, but it's around 28 degrees of Virgo, if I'm not mistaken. So the moon is just separated from its apogee. So it's pretty far away from Earth. Okay, so the first thing that I look at is the sect of the chart. And the sect of the chart is, of course, if the chart, the person was born at night or at day time. Ursa was born at the night chart, which put a lot of emphasis on the moon. So the moon is the ruler of the sect. And other planets of the diurnal sect are Mars and Venus, which are pretty powerfully positioned in the chart. They are both on angular places or close to angular places. Mars is not in the angular sign, but it's really close to the angular cusp. And Venus is in the angular sign, in the 4th sign, although she's also in the 5th quadrant cusp of the Placidus house. I also use different quadrant house system for different needs, but the most standard quadrant house system I use is Placidus. I just got used to it from my time as a modern astrologer. So for me, at least, part of what I try to experience when I see a chart is the moment of the birth. Probably Gemini does something of the same. Thinking of the visibility of planets, thinking of what was reflecting most of the sun's light, and other things that go into that. So, sorry, I'll take a bit of a breath. That was a kind of a surprise for me. I thought I have another 30 minutes. Okay. So Ursa was born in a really dark night because both luminaries were below the ascendant, and there's really a lot of striking elements which are getting a lot of emphasis from their phase from the sun. We can see that Saturn and Jupiter were really bright in the sky. They're really nearing their opposition phase, so they're really bright and just above her head. So they're getting a lot of attention and pulling her out into the world. But essentially, most of the essence, I would say, of her life, which is the luminaries, are below the ascendant. They are in water signs, and it's a night chart. So there's a lot of watery, nocturnal, night, and invisible kind of element to her life, or to her soul, in a sense. So that gives us a very intuitive type, emotional type, very private, very personal, very reflective. It's what the ancient philosopher would call the passive nous, the reflective nous. Nous is the consciousness. But there are mitigating factors on that, because both sect planets, which are Venus and Mars, are both in masculine signs. So they have that fiery element, or that masculine element, or the diurnal element to them. So this balances out a little bit of the introvert character of the water and the night chart. I have much to say about that, but I think I will move to the other consideration, which I think is of major importance. And I just put some notes here. Let me just open them. Okay. So another thing that the Hellenistic astrologer would look, maybe before that, one of the first things that they would look is the triplicity lords of the sect light. And the sect light here is the moon. And although there are a couple of sources that tell us that if the moon is in a cadent house and in fall, according to valence, it cannot be the high leg, it cannot rule the life. So we should default to the sun. But the moon is in an angular sign, so it can behold the ascendant. So it's in the 7th sign. And it's also the ruler of the sun. So I would give the moon the most weight for showing or expressing Ursa's life. And the first thing that an Hellenistic astrologer would do is look at the triplicity lords of the sect light, one of the first things. And these are Mars in a night chart, and then Venus. And they are both, as I said before, they're angular, or at least succeeded by sign here. So they are very powerful. And this may show a kind of a wind that can carry her to accomplish her life's agenda. But because the moon is in its fall, or in this case, in the degree of its fall, because it's opposite his degree of exaltation, that might show struggles and hardships on the way to provide the life's agenda. And being in the 6th quadrant house below the horizon, takes on the signification of the 6th house, which at least traditionally are not very good. That's the house of sickness, that's house of slaves, Of course, we should interpret it in a modern perspective, but it could be a feeling of being put down, working for others and not for your own agenda sometimes. It could show health problems, allergies, things that have to do. I think the Neptune here contributes to, a sensitivity also in the body. Sorry, I'm speaking too fast. Let me slow down a little. Okay, so where was I? So after choosing the luminary of the life, we want to see the ruler of that luminary. The ruler of that luminary is considered the oikodespotes, or the house ruler. And he's like the typecast of the person. And Mars really wins this contest because he's the ruler of the triplicity, he's the ruler of the sign, the face, the term. So he's like the ultimate ruler of the moon. And he's, he's an inconjunct or a quincunx in a modern language from the moon. So it's, in a sense, it's a non-aspect. He does not behold the moon. So that might show something more erratic in the way that moon behaves because its owner doesn't tend to it so much. So that might show, delays and dilemmas in achieving the life's agenda. It doesn't mean you cannot achieve it, but it can show that you sometimes, put your energies elsewhere and shift and move, and it's hard to get in focus or in line with your calling or your inner. You can say the owners of the chart agenda for you. But also that's also a typecast for an emphasis of energies that are expressed by your soul, which is the martial watery element. So so there is a lot of it could be a lot of emotional turmoil in a sense. But of course, the moon in Scorpio is also very resourceful and powerful in many other senses. But we could talk a whole day about the moon in Scorpio and its different expressions. So considering this, the next ruler in line in the hierarchy is what is called the Kurios. And the Kurios is maybe the most hard planet to find because we need to take the ruler of the 5 life Heilig points, and we need to see which one of them is stronger, which one of them is making a phase or rising likely, which one of them rules the midheaven, the ruler of the ascendant. All of them get into that contest. And in your chart, it's pretty difficult to choose one because you have many planets that are, you can say, a candidate for being the Kurios. Mars, of course, is about to rise, and it's near the ascendant, so it's very strong in that sense. Venus is also very strong in her own sect. She's an evening planet, which contributes to her own nature. And Mercury is also very, very powerful in your chart. Mercury is making a phasis, is rising. In this case, it's setting into the rays of the sun, but it's exactly on that degree. I think Firmicus tells us that it's around the 18th degree for Mercury to make its zodiacal rising and setting. So Mercury is declaring something very powerful for your chart. Mercury is also the ruler of Mars, and he still has a lot of dignity in the N degree, which is also the Exis Mundi degree, right? The cardinal degree, which is a very powerful degree. It's where the sun is the highest in our hemisphere. He is also the ruler of the sun by term and face, which was also considered very powerful ruler. The term ruler of one of the luminaries is a very powerful ruler. So I would say Mars and Mercury are maybe the strongest candidates for navigating the life, but also Saturn gets a lot of emphasis because Saturn rules the MC, it rules the term and face of the ascendant, it rules the path of fortune, and it's very dignified in its own sign. And we know that the MC has to do with the outcome, with things that are expressed in the world, with action, as the Greeks would put it, praxis. So he also gets a lot of emphasis in directing your life. But maybe because he is close to the South Node, then there's some energy directed out of displacement in a sense, and puts it more of something that it's in the past, in a sense. And this is a kind of more modern view. So this is the treatment of the rulers that gives a kind of a hierarchy that then we can look at things like prediction and put more emphasis on those rulers. So I did that very fast, but of course there's more nuances to that. Okay, so how am I with time? Just that I will know. You don't know.
You're about halfway through, Michael. You got about 10 to 15 minutes still.
So I think I will put much emphasis on the ruler of the ascendant for the time that I have. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. So of course, one of the most important ruler for navigating the life is the ruler of the ascendant, and you have a Taurus rising, which put a lot of emphasis on material, on the body, on the senses, on the aesthetics, and on the need for security. And the same as in the Vedic system, in the Hellenistic system, the traditional system, the moon also has rulership over Taurus because he's the exalted ruler of Taurus. And the moon in a night chart is the Almuten, or the winner is the translation. He's the one getting the most dignity or rulership of Taurus in a night chart. So he might show the motivation for relationships in the one hand because it's the seventh sign, but because the moon is in its fall and it's approaching a square to Saturn, that might show a relationship that didn't go well, or maybe more than one, or some kind of struggle in things that have to do with relationship. And this is something that we get a lot of testimonies in your chart for. So this is part of the, I would say, where the energy of the ascendant is pulled to where the moon is, which is also routine and work and things that have to do with health. And I would say also that providing the agenda for Taurus is first and foremost the need for physical security. So that could be on sacrificing things that have to do with more heart in them, more passion, because of the need to get by. And also because Saturn is ruling the term and face of the ascendant. So he gets also, he's also directing some of the energy of the ascendant to the 10th house, which would pull you to work in more Saturnian institutions, things that have to do with government and military, together with Mars ruling the moon. That's the military kind of a signature. And because it's in Aquarius, it has to do with maybe technology, computers, aviation, that's the Air Force, stuff of that sort. But it can also be things that have to do with law, or things that have to do on stuff. Sorry. Okay. I will come back to that when I end this cycle. So returning to the ascendant, the primary lord of the ascendant is Venus, and Venus in your chart is in an angular sign, and it's in a fire sign. It's in Leo, and that shows. I would say that shows that you have a heart of a lion in a sense, because it's also on Regulus, which is a very powerful fixed star, having to do with honor and dignity and, you know, Leonian things. So you have a very flamboyant and sorry, English is challenging me. Let's see, I'll just see where I wrote some of those stuff. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so that is a very strong expressive quality. And I would say that puts a lot of motivation in securing the household, in being a queen in your own castle. A lot of, and this of course has the testimony of the sun in Cancer, which I didn't talk about too much also. But there's a lot of emphasis on home and heart. And being on the cusp of the 5th quadrant house, that might show the motivation of having children, but also a lot of need for pleasure and change and excitement, very sociable conjunction. But this conjunction is very interesting in itself, as much as it shows your temperament in being, you know, with a lot of humoristic and exciting and even provocative in some ways. The Uranus connection can show also some kind of detachment and something that would put you in arm's length sometimes from committing in a relationship. And I think this is something that, if I take now a little bit of the whole chart into consideration, I think you have such an intense emotional nature and such a powerful need for intimacy and connection, but maybe because of past experiences, maybe because you witnessed separations in your family, separations of your parents, or maybe a separation from a sister sometimes because of Venus, then you may lose the trust in the other person. Or maybe the other person has, how do you say, betrayed your trust. And I would say, you know, in a more psychological sense, that the moon in Scorpio in the 7th sign can show trust issues, can show that you're suspicious, that you are, you don't give your heart so quickly, but you long for it, and you have a lot of emotional desire for intimacy and for familial connections and for, you know, opening up. But Venus Uranus can, you know, push people away a little bit, put a kind of electrical fence around your heart, so you can disassociate or bring people into your life which you know that are not for you, or people that cannot really commit. And we can give a lot of options for that and try to tell interesting stories. But that's probably part of the narrative of the chart. Even if I take it a little bit more in a modern sense, seeing the North Node in Leo and the South Node in Aquarius with Saturn there, show that you put a lot of energy in career and in a kind of, you know, disassociate yourself from the personal, from being centered in the heart, from being from letting go and having devotion to the other person in personal relationship. Let's talk about the Sun in the third for a while, for a little bit. And I would emphasize some of the things that maybe in modern astrology they don't put a lot of emphasis on. The third house also has to do with religion and religious observance, and it's the house of the goddess. So of course it amplifies your intellectual stimulation, which is very amplified in your chart, if I didn't say so before. Mercury is really strong. You always need to learn new things, and you have a very strong intellectual amplitude. And this is, of course, also a testimony of the third house. But the third house also gives a kind of a religious need and experience. It might also show being politically active also. I would say, and I'm combining other different things in your chart right now, which I cannot name every one of them, but I would say that that you are really sensitive for the minorities, you are really sensitive for people's rights, and you want to be engaged in this, you want to be engaged in the community, you want to be, you probably have interest in politics. I would also put interest in psychology because of the moon in Scorpio and other things in your chart. Maybe your father was a religious figure or did something in religious circles because of the sun. And of course, this house speaks of siblings. It can show a dominant sibling. And sometimes the sun can also burn things. So it can show things that, you know, that went wrong with a sister or something of that sort. Or that you feel that, oh, what's the word? Sorry, okay, I'll go on. Let's talk about a little bit about the moon again. The moon, as signifying the mother in the sixth house, may show a mother coming from a low social status. It may show maybe that the mother was put down in some sense, or even suffered from some physical illness, or maybe even some kind of depression because of the approaching to Saturn. The moon is what's the word? Separating from a sextile to that Venus Uranus and a trine from Mercury. So in a sense, it shows us that you already embed these qualities, because when the moon is separating from planets, it is like it is pulling their strings and playing their music. So this music is in the air in your life. And this is very artistic combination. And this might show someone who's inclined to writing or writing poetry, or I don't know, some musical inclination. This is a wonderful combination in your chart. It might show maybe even that your mother had a kind of artistic energy to her, and that's something that you took from her in a sense.
Michael, we have to close.
Okay, wow.
And if you have last words or conclusion.
Yes, I want to say just one more thing. I think the Pluto-Jupiter may have to do with maybe some addictions in the past or someone close to you, and that your devotion to your faith and to spirituality is something that helped you get out of that. Because it's in the fifth sign, it could also show things that challenged you, that had to do with your children. Maybe it was a pregnancy or a miscarriage or something that also, that the faith and the belief. I see a lot of religious devotion in your chart and a need to find that trust in a higher power. And I think, and that's where I'm going. I think that's the next stage. Also, the next stage in the application of the moon is the trine to Jupiter. And I think this Jupiter is in a sense, is the next stage after the Saturnian energy that you needed to fulfill to be in line in the world and survive, etc. But there's something of a healer in you. And I think you can even work with people that were addicted or mistreated or I'm sorry, many words I can't translate simultaneously from Hebrew. So I think between. So I'll just say something about the question. Do I have 2 minutes for that?
We have to close, so
okay.
Just
so I would just say I do see an emphasis on your career. The perfection goes to the 9th house now, and you're learning something new, and you'll be finishing soon, and then the perfection will go to the 10th house. But there is also a love in the air that will probably come next year or a little bit after that. So I would say focus on career for this year, but be open with your heart if something's come up, because in the solar return, Scorpio is rising, and that would bring up the issue relationship, and Jupiter is there. So there could be a meeting and something can begin. So you need to be with the heart open. Okay. That was.
Thank you very much.
It was running, yeah.
There was a question for you. Which software are you using for your chart?
This software is it's called ZET. Z-E-T. I'm also using Delphic Oracle, which I wanted to use for zodiac releasing and stuff like that, but we didn't get enough time for that. So that's the 2 softwares that I use.
Okay. Thank you. Well done.
You're welcome.
So Gemini, are you all good to go?
Yeah, I believe so. I apologize. Internet's been in and out. But let's see. Do you hear me clearly now?
Yes. Can you unshare, Michael? Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Again, yeah, sorry for the order change, and I'm very excited to share here. So
it's called Mercury retrograde in Pisces.
It has been a pretty extreme one, that's for sure. But with Ursula's power of Mercury in her chart, I think we're good moving forward. So It's a great joy to be part of this. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm always honored to share my take on astrology. I'll just say my name is Gemini Brett. I started my quest in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, and I very much branched out from there, but so much, like I like to say, the stock of my starry stew lives in that philosophy of a deep connection to the living sky, and also much in kind of the archetypal awareness. But my studies since that school has expanded through a study of the roots and Hellenistic astrology and some evolutionary astrology and just many paradigms true to the Gemini moniker I've chosen. I like to grab from a bunch of places. And so much of my work really is informed through my direct experience of the sky, through the quadrivium arts of sacred geometry and musical harmony and more. And also through contemplations of the great teachings of Hermes in the Emerald Tablet. So some of that will show up today. I was meant to follow Maurice, and so this was built to say that, yeah, he chose the card the other day of Ursa Minor. It's so appropriate, right? And as he mentioned, I chose Delphinus, the dolphin. And Maurice mentioned that Delphinus is near the midheaven when I was born. Well, it's true also for Ursa. Here is Ursa's nativity in a different kind of look. This is Stellarium astronomy software, which is free, by the way, stellarium.org, highly recommended. You check it out and cast your chart in there as well. Sorry, also true to the Gemini moniker, I'm multitasking right now because I want to set a stopwatch so I can make sure I know how to monitor this thing. All right. So Delphinus is here at the time of Ursa's birth. That green line is the meridian. That's where everything culminates. So we see that the dolphin is about to culminate when Ursa was born. So it's wonderful that that constellation came in, and this is today. So transiting Venus is aligned to the dolphin. From constellationsofwords.com, a wonderful site, we see that the stars of the dolphin constellation live around 17 to 19 degrees tropical Aquarius, and there's Venus today, right? So 19 degrees tropical Aquarius, and this means in Ursa's 10th house. So 10th house questions of career, Venus, love, and I break down her many questions. Should I love my work, or should I work towards love? And the answer, of course, is both. And I'll say that this is an incredibly magical window to me from the sacred astronomy perspective. 54 to 57 years old is the absolute essential energy of moon, sun, nodes, dragon stuff. So I'm going to get into that and show why this is today. This is from the teachings of Hermes, who speaks about the moon and the sun and the earth, the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. But how about the world of Ursa, the world of bears? So Ursa Minor showed up, whose tail is North Star, where we get directions. But the big bear was Callisto in the sky, Ursa Major. And no surprise, this is again Ursa's nativity. Here's Ursa Major just standing on the horizon in the north in the moment of her birth. You can see there just next to N for north, that's the big bear. Right, so that's a beautiful thing given her name. And Ursa, I'll be really fascinated to know if you knew about that. All right, so we're going to look underground now. I'm going to take the ground away so we can look through the 1st to the 6th house. We look for the northern hemisphere in the direction north. So basically on the right of the screen, it's 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6 going to the left where the moon is. So backwards from what we're used to looking at in a chart, because in the northern hemisphere, the midheaven is in the south, right? So here I'm looking north with my back to the midheaven. So I really want to speak about what's under the bear, but I can't first honor this truth of Ursa's powerful alignments to the sacred hoop of stars. This is a term that Lakota used for this sacred space that modern astronomers called the winter hexagon. And we see many of Ursa's planets within this great asterism: Mars, Sun, and Mercury, who especially in this group of stars that include the star of the great constellation Auriga. The card that Michael drew at the top of the screen is Capella, and then Castor and Pollux, who hold the sun, the twins, Procyon, the little dog, Sirius, the big dog, Regal, the left foot of Orion. And modern astronomers use Betelgeuse for the winter hexagon, but the Lakota spoke about the Pleiades, which is going to show up today too. So very powerful alignments, and especially with Mercury, who's, according to the words of the Celtic prophecies of our time, this turning of the ages, at the hand of the high man. And we know Mercury in Ursa's chart, the last degree of Gemini. So I can't not honor this. I didn't in the article I wrote, actually, not true to the Gemini moniker, but I want to get back over towards the bear. So I will say first, though, that there will be a solar eclipse at Ursa's Mercury next year in 2020 at the June solstice, just as there was Metonic cycle 19 years before in 2001. This was the eclipse that was the prenatal eclipse to the 9/11 event that changed the world. And I could speak about that all day, but that's not what I'm here for. But Ursa, if you and I have a chance to check in at length another time, I really want to go back into that time and speak about where you were, and see that so much of the way that your great wisdom and experience and exploration and expression of life in Mercury is going to be informed through this great light coming from the shadow in these eclipse cycles that we'll see in many ways. We want to talk about this kind of dragon too, right? The lunar nodes. So here I'm showing the golden curve is the ecliptic, that's the path of the sun. But the silver curve is the path of the moon. I like to call them the circles of spirit and soul, respectively. And where they cross, right there in the Crab constellation, Ursa, that's your north lunar node. Sign of tropical Leo, sign of sidereal Cancer, constellation of the Crab, and very close, the beehive. This is also the manger. So there's some of the Christ mysteries tied here, which is an amazing thing for tropical Leo and a north node as well. But I want to dig into the essence of the queen bee, because when I say both career and relationship, for me, and we've heard this from other astrologers today, I think that when you follow your heart into choosing to be the queen in your career, you're going to find divine relationships show up. But I think you've got to choose to put the crown on your head. And you wrote a couple options about, should I go with, you know, community work, or should I open my own health and wellness spa? I've studied in this way, and I really love that idea. So the water is so strong in your chart, so I see a lot of water in this spa. And I also see a layout of 7, which I'll try to get to. I just want to show that this is the beehive cluster. It's a very powerful, subtle place in the sky, but when we zoom into it, the heart just sings. And I really do want to invoke not only the mother bear, Ursa Major on the horizon, but just below at the north lunar node, this essence of the queen bee. This cluster reminds me a lot of this cluster, the Pleiades, which is also very powerful for you at the time of your birth. Very powerful place in space, the 7 sisters. And I want to speak to you today about a golden ring with 7 diamonds on it. It's something I really suggest you bring in as a talisman. And I'll show you why. But back to these 7 stars, the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, of the Big Bear. And just below the bear at the time of your birth in the north, we find Venus in the sign of Leo. Not only with Uranus, so very revolutionary queen energy, this Leo Venus, but with Regulus, the royal star that rules them all. So this really, I think, lends to your queenship, this Leo essence of Venus. So why am I so focused on Venus? Your Taurus rising. So from the Hellenistic perspective, the ascendant, the horoscopus, the hour marker, Venus is the lady of your hour marker, or the steerswoman of your ship. A beautiful term for the ascendant in the old days was oiox, which means rudder. because the ascendant rudders back and forth on the horizon every day. And Venus, for the Taurus rising native, steers the ship. So we really want to focus on this goddess in your chart. And the Leo Venus, of course, she's looking to that Cancer sun. She's in the sign of that light. And according to the old ways, Leo and Cancer don't really see one another. There's some beautiful astronomical, well, I'm just going to leave that there. So we want to bring that in because the Cancer sun of the nurturer, right? And the mother, and you're a mother of three and a grandmother. And I think you've been a mother in relationships some, which I want to dig into. Probably be a mother as a wife, and maybe even a mother to your siblings and a mother to your own parents, I would imagine, looking at your chart. And we want to honor that and own that nurturing water and that beauty and feed that, but also shift into this Leo consciousness, that north node there, right at the beehive cluster, this royal queen, Venus with Regulus. So here's Regulus that I brought in at the bottom of the screen. We see Venus and Uranus and Regulus there. And just notice that you were born on the place of Earth, where Venus was literally as buried below the ground. I had to take the ground away to see her, which the software allows us to do. But our present experience on Earth, of course, does not. You'd have to go to the other side of the world. So why is this queen buried down there? You know, the old ideas of this fourth place in the bottom of the heavens, it's a lot of the things that we suppress. So I want to invoke the glory of this queen and bring her back to the surface and put that scepter in your hand. And I want to speak about this queen. So I'm showing at the bottom Regulus, that's S2 and Intrepid software here. And here S1 right at the ascendant. I mean, 17 arc minutes from the ascendant is the degree in minutes of the great Bohemian magical star Algol at the time of your birth. Yeah. Algol, the eye of the Gorgon, Medusa. Medusa, who was a queen, who is a queen. And I think this is very important. I think this is a story that resonates with your own somehow. And, you know, it's a heavy story, and it's a beautiful story. For this queen of earth, who some say disgraced Athena's hallowed halls when she made love with Poseidon there. Some say she was raped and became this monster, but I see that as the cocoon stage from the queen on earth, who is about earthly things, to this queen of heaven, for when Perseus took her head with the assistance of Mercury and of Pallas Athena. From the blood that dripped to the stones rose the white warrior and Pegasus, the horse that rises to the heavens. So this is your birth moment as well. And we see Pegasus there ascending towards the heavens and on high, aligned to Jupiter in some ways. And we see Algol pointing to the ascendant, projecting to the ascendant. And so I want to be careful with my projections, but I see her story linked to your own. When I see this in the chart, sometimes I'll start pulling in asteroids, which isn't something I always do. But when the myths come alive, so much of them live in the asteroid assignment. So this A5 up here in the 12th house, that's the asteroid Medusa. And she's right across from your Neptune, which is part of the story, or Poseidon. So I bring in A3 here in the 5th house. That's the asteroid Poseidon, who is right with the true black moon Lilith at the time of your birth. Lilith's story also very interesting. All right. And so I have a podcast of Medusa you can find on SoundCloud, my telling of it. I honor this is the beautiful transformation of a queen to the way of heavens. And this is what I just want to invoke with you. I wish we had more time to tell the story at length. So I hope you'll go listen to that. It's a long episode, but just maybe the first half an hour is the story over some crazy music. It's a crazy story, you know? So is the story of Lilith. And I see in a lot of these energies, perhaps abuse in youth. I mean, perhaps simply the abuse of being born into a sexist or a racist culture. You know, you in the military and the Air Force, can we see the Air Force in your chart? I mean, how about air sign Saturn at the angle and air sign Mars at an angle? You know, that really feels like Air Force to me. but going there and probably at times where your own eclipse family of birth was really activating your Venus, I'm sure that was a very difficult thing. So I don't know how this is played in your life. We all have a chart, we all have a song, but we can dance to it any way we choose. And many, like you, choose to dance courageously. And that tends to also bring some traumas. We see Venus right with Uranus, right? And right with Regulus. So there's some of that electric awakening of the queen. And if it's so buried, sometimes we need very powerful energies in life to invoke that essence. So may she rise and come to the surface. This is Athena. You know, it's strange and it's odd for people in this Medusa story, which feels so patriarchal, that it was Athena who turned the Gorgon's head to snakes, who turned this queen into what she was. And my favorite response when I share that is, well, she was the brainchild of Zeus, so she's the brainchild of the patriarchy. But there's something more to this. This is Medusa as Athena's brooch. This is Minerva. This is in the Library of Congress in the United States, actually at the top of the stairs. She has all the divine sciences in her scroll, and they left astrology out, but I think it's in that rolled up bit down there. Athena, in your chart, very close to Mars. And there's a story that may or may not be of the original canon, but it's one I love to tell. It's also my podcast, Athena and Mars, Moondrop Blues. I'd love for you to connect to this because there was a lost love, perhaps. An iron stake, it said, was driven through Athena's mind so she would forget her passion and love for Mars. He never forgot and tried to fill that hole where his heart once was with sexual conquest and bloodlust. Yeah. But she completely forgot. But you'll hear in this story, every time they met, there was something that sung in the heart, because the heart will never forget what the mind was cursed to. And so part of invoking this essence of the queen and this true transformation is going to be to retrieve your innocence and your naivete and your trust in the essence of love. And Venus is the one of the books so much about this to me. So Algol might project to your ascendant, and that's all good. But if I had my feet on the earth at the time of your birth, I wouldn't say Algol was your rising star. I mean, that idea of projecting fixed stars to the ecliptic is what we do with them. It really opens up beautiful questions of what is the zodiac anyway. But if I'm on the ground, I see the Pleiades right there rising, the seven sisters, other Bohemian stars, these magical stars in the chart. They don't show up right on the ground, right? So the chart doesn't show us a very perfect image of the earth in many ways. So I really encourage people to cast their birth chart, not only as we're used to, but also in this regard, and have a look around. And I do sessions specifically tuned to like kind of the astronomy also. Doing more of that today though than I usually do. So the Pleiades, the seven sisters, the gold, Leo, Venus, and the diamond is the sacred stone to the magical star Algol. And so I think a really wonderful talisman for you, this one was made by my friend Jamie Joseph, but it would be this kind of 7 clusters of diamonds, small diamonds to wear. And I think when you build your health and wellness center, that some kind of layout of the 7, like the Pleiades and Ursa Major, and honoring these 7s, and Diamond 7 could be a beautiful way to call in the essence of your great guides and the power of this transformative queen, Medusa. So work towards love or love your work, both. And as Marie said too, with Taurus rising, I hope you will be your own best client at the spa of the diamond ring. I see that the ascendant, and this is true to the teachings of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, is what we are learning in life. I like to say what was rising when you rose is rising within you, and that you can raise it up. That we incarnate into matter because spirit itself cannot grow. It is everything. It is therefore nothing. And so through this great miracle of reflecting the one light onto earth, and this is how the moon delivers the sun, we come here. So number one mission, feel. optional. But if we truly feel, we open the gateway to healing, to knowing, to growing. This is how we grow in matter. And this is why the one thing will never, ever stop growing, because of this great miracle, like dancers like you. So we can raise the ascendant up. And for me, when I see Taurus rising, I see one who is here to help serve the evolution of Taurus. Let's stop on another picture while I express this. Just gaze at the Pleiades. So what is Taurus? I mean, very different than Cancer, very same, you know, embodiment coming down, but it's shifting into receiving, sensuality, and not giving all the time. I don't think I have an image here, but I'll say that at your 7th house, astrologically, tropical Scorpio, but the scales are right there. We need balance in giving and receiving. And I think your chart shows beautiful service and nurturing and like a herstory of this, but coming in to shift to find that balance and receiving embodiment. So I hope you'll soak in the tubs of your spa, you know, and really sink into that essence of allowing yourself to be the one that is nurtured and treated. All right. So this is your solar return last year. And what I'm showing is how close Venus was to your natal Venus. This happens every 8 years. It's called the Venus synodic return. And it invokes the Venus cycle that we were born into. And Venus cycle is 9 months. And we tune it to the synod meeting of Venus and Sun. This was the Venus-Sun conjunction before your birth. Venus is direct. And I start the cycle I've come to with Venus between Earth and Sun. And that means retrograde Venus conjoined Sun. So this was even before you were conceived, but I believe that this is when the essence of the Venus cycle to which you were born was herself conceived, that this is the devotion archetypally of the global goddess that I believe your 4th house, Leo, Venus, Uranus, Regulus, all that is here in service to. And it's Aries, right? It's making that movement. It's reclaiming power, right? So we've heard this come up from all of the astrologers in one way or another today. Like there's a warrior nature here. There's somebody who's here to fight for rights, the revolution. And often that, of course, is nurtured itself through hardship. But that's a beautiful way of our training. So Aries, Venus, I think this fire of the Aries cycle, this fire of your Leo Venus, this is something that you want to bring in to balance the water, which is very significant, of course, we know in your chart. I'll say that you were born from the shamanic astrology point of view in the cycle where the goddess herself, the goddess, is reclaiming the power of the heart. And that invokes, of course, Leo themes as well. This was the most recent retrograde Venus conjoined Sun in Aries. So this was the beginning of the recent 19-month Venus synodic return. Started in 2017. It featured, during that cycle, that great American eclipse. They called it a total solar eclipse at your Venus, Uranus. I'd love to hear that story. Also, the exterior conjunction, Earth, Sun, Venus. Venus is far from Sun, the middle of that cycle, right with Pluto and right opposite your natal Sun, right? So we can say that that 19-month thing, which I think is about you coming to a higher octave of the expression of the goddess of love, invoking the nature of your own Venus, choosing to pioneer on that path, release things. I bet you that was happening for you between that time of March 2017 and October 2018, when the most recent Venus synodic cycle started, when she came between Earth and Sun in Scorpio, ending your Venus cycle. And yet, that conjunction right on your moon. And so a 19-month Scorpio Venus cycle who will invoke the powers of your Scorpio moon. Of course, this is during a time where transiting Uranus, Taurus will oppose your natal moon. The revolution of awakening that powerful force. What is the moon? We're going to go there. But very importantly, while the moon is being transited by Uranus, Sun transited by Saturn. Pluto's done his thing opposing your sun by transit, and now Saturn comes in. So what Pluto ripped open in the ways of the psyche, Saturn will come help you bring it into form. Saturn cycles are 9 months long. And I'll just say the first exact opposition of transiting Saturn to your natal sun featured an exact conjunction of Taurus, Moon, and Uranus. So now we want to switch to some of these revolutions of the Uranus way, calling back that essence of receiving sensuality, embodiment, health, and wellness. I love that this is part of your study. Saturn cycles 9 months long, so I treat them like a pregnancy. I usually meet with clients once each of the trimesters, and we work on rewriting rules. So Saturn opposite your sun, I will say this is you literally pregnant with and ready to rebirth your sun, a new light, a new Cancer expression. So I would ask you to write down what the rules of Cancer are. What does it mean to have a Cancer sun? And see if that's true to how you want to live moving forward. Is it invoke a lot of the patterns and partnerships of the past, your youth, whatever? Were you a parent to your parents, to your siblings? Has that been a theme in your life? And that's beautiful. But if you give and don't receive, how can you find that balance? Right? So we heard in your devotions, I probably have this soon, something about, well, the cats that you're dating think that you're too busy. Well, maybe you're dating cats that need a mother, you know? And in finding someone who's also so busy in their own thing so you can have that balance and choosing to wear that crown of the queen and then calling in the king, right? Instead of the prince. Okay. So sun and moon, the great luminaries, you know? And we see on that Venus synodic return for the last solar return chart, we also see this very strong alignment of the nodes. The nodes move around the zodiac in 18.618 years on average. And so every 18 and a half years, we have a nodal return. And here's the exact date of your nodal return. It was May 13th, 2018. But it exists within this window. This is my nodal return window theory. How long is a nodal return? And for me, they go between 18 years and 19 years. So the first time we get 1 year. For the second, 36 to 38. And the third is a 3-year thing, invoking also the essence of Trithe's great Hermes. So the end gateway is this, 57 years old. Every 19 years, we have a solar return and a lunar return the same day. So we see more essence of both of your luminaries invoked. So I go to another story. This is Latona, who is the mother of Diana and Apollo. The twin lights, the luminaries. And it wasn't such a gentle, beautiful scene like this. She was on the run from the Python, from Typhon, who was invoked by Hera's jealousy that Latona was carrying her husband, Jupiter's children. But she birthed them, and when she did, Apollo put an arrow through that dragon to protect his mother from his golden bow. So this I found to be such a crazy miracle right at that beehive cluster as I was thinking about the Latona story with you. This is the asteroid Latona. It's like right with your north node. And what are nodes but sun and moon, right? So Latona, who gave birth to the sun and the moon, are living at your Leo sun, north lunar node. I mean, that to me is so amazing. I really encourage you to get into that story. We can also see that Juno is very close to your sun. Your sun, however, is separating from Juno. But Juno is hidden under the beams, combust. There's something about jealousy in this probably that very much relates to this story. Whether it was from you or towards you or whatever, that you're working through to call back that queen and release some of the over-giving tendencies so you can receive. Apollo's golden bow we only see here during a solar eclipse. This brings us to this dragon, the nodes. The moon snakes about the path of the sun, crossing the ecliptic at the lunar nodes, a place where the three parts of the philosophy are one: earth, matter, moon, soul, sun, spirit. I said that we're here to raise our rising sign up. I feel that, and I do look to the north node in the house and evolutionary astrology considerations and shamanic astrology considerations. But I see the way that we will do this is to bring the essence of our lineage, our medicine. So the 54 year on this thing is eclipse cycles, Saros cycles. And I'm running out of time, so this is, I think, for a longer exploration. But I'll just say we see these curves of eclipses repeat every 18.03 years. The reason why is because they tie together many months, the cycles of lunar size, of lunar latitude, of lunar phase. And these are the eclipses. This is your prenatal eclipse, 18 years old, 36 years old, 54 years old. So I'd really love to look into that. I will say that that Saros series began in 1096, the year of the first Crusades. And there was a goddess, or maybe a queen herself, Minna of Worms, who came up in my research when I looked at that year. That it feels like you're carrying some of this energy of this amazing queen who refused to convert. So bringing in the diamond ring.
You have, let's close, Gemini, if you have closing statements.
Yeah, I got 90 seconds to get through these things. That diamond ring, Apollo's bow, we only see Diana's bow. We see it every month when the moon is reborn after new moon, but we only see in the middle of the night during the lunar eclipse. And we have to remember that it is Diana who delivered Apollo, the midwife, just as moon delivers the sunlight. So when I look at your chart and this beautiful water essence in the Cancer way, I have to remember that that Cancer light is being delivered to my eyes through a Scorpio moon. And I want to invoke for you that power and that magic. So the last things I'll say, there is a lot of slides. Well, to say that your secondary progression, the moon is in the 7th, the soul's mood is on relationship. It began with a new moon in the 4th. The relationship that will come in is family. It's real. It's long lasting. And I look to your progress Mercury Mars square, and it's about relationship and caring, and where's the balance of giving and receiving. Annual perfections, now 9th house, study. Next year, starting with the solar return this year, 10th house, career. You will be supported in beginning what you do with Saturn at the midheaven as your time lord. But I just wanted to say that Saturn might be right at your midheaven, but Jupiter and Chiron are just equal. Jupiter's equal latitude and Chiron's even higher. And they're in this stream of the water bearer. So I really feel this essence of the water and water bearing being part of your calling. And I feel like to completely open that now, the calling for you is to go to your moon, to let Uranus electrify it, revolutionize, bring back that Scorpio, which is shifting from serving the suppressed to control me, to controlling the expressed to serve me, but coming into your power, your self-growth. Let that reflect the way that you nurture in life. Nurture you, choose this spa that you will open. And I think somebody that comes to soak in one of these magical tubs just might someday put a ring on your finger. So thank you very much again, and I can't wait to hear your reflections. Oh, the last thing I wanted to say is I looked at the Mayan calendar for you. It's 12 Jaguar, that shaman. You've studied astrology for 20 years. Saturn's up there at the midheaven. You know, may astrology be part of what you offer in health and wellness always. And that today is a day in the Maya Tzolk'in that says it's a great day to receive divination. So I'm really glad this aligned up so we could all speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, all the faculty providing such a rich and yet concise analysis. You know, we all feel like there's hours worth more of discussion here, and yet we gather so much information from so many different angles. And it's interesting that using so many different techniques, many of us came back to the moon, seeing it as a very important factor in the position of the chart, and learning so many different things. For Theo, you know, the whole thing about the ascendant degree and her name, kind of mind-blowing. and then looking at the sects and the nodes and the constellations. That's the beauty of astrology. I think it's a good demonstration here of how diverse it can be, how colorful, how technical, and how spiritual, how mythological, and how scientific. You know, all these different parts of our own brain have been put on a plate. And Ursa, I keep confusing your name. You can unmute yourself and take a deep breath.
Yeah.
How are you?
It's overwhelming, but I just want to say thank you to everyone. And all of the analysis was right on, you know, and what I'm going through right now, and I have a term paper I have to write. I'm doing a term paper on addiction, so that's due today. The one thing that I just, because we've taken up a lot of time, but I really liked what Michael said about being a healer. You know, I'm really, you know, getting into that, interested in that, and using my nurturing, and what someone said about me nurturing my family members. And you know, my mom, she was, you know, she was an alcoholic, so, you know, I had to help her out a lot. It's, you know, everything was like right on point.
Thank you so much. So just reflecting a little, you know, a little back to your childhood, did your parents stay together or did they get along?
Well, no, my dad and my mom, and you know, what someone said about my ancestry, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm going back to, I'm a descendant of slaves, so we're going down to Pontotoc, Mississippi, to, you know, look up some of our, because we have a lot of oral history, and, you know, our family is really interested in, you know, where we came from. So but my dad and my mom, they weren't together. I was raised by a stepdad. So, and we're pretty close, but my sisters, all of us, you know, we grew up very poor, and we were on welfare, but, you know, all of us have gotten degrees. So, you know, I don't know. I think our ancestors had a lot to do with that. And so I'm really interested in ancestry.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And did you feel this pull between career and home, this whole need between education and family?
Well, I did, because when I, you know, I was in the Air Force, then, you know, I got out, I got married, got divorced. But when I went into the Air Force, everybody was like, the Air Force, you know, it was like unheard of. And especially back in 1979, a Black woman going into the Air Force was, you know, and then when I
Pioneer.
when I did go in, because I'm from Beloit, Wisconsin, really, racism, we grew up around all different kinds. It was only like 30,000 people. That's where I'm back in Beloit now. And I had never experienced any type of racism until I went into the Air Force. And, you know, so that was somebody, I think somebody touched upon that. Yeah. So, but, you know, my family, and I think somebody else touched upon this, I was always the one that went their own way, you know, even with my astrology and with my being interested in metaphysical activities. Our family was always Christian, really like on the verge of Southern Baptist, you know. My grandmother started the first African-American church here. So yeah, everybody thinks I'm a weirdo. And that shows up with the Uranus, Venus, you know. So yeah, that was right on the mark.
Well, wonderful. And just a few of us touched on siblings. Was there a significant sibling, whether there was either you parenting a sibling or there was some jealousy or competition?
Well, back when I was in elementary school, my mom, she had a nervous breakdown, which that shows up with Neptune and the moon, you know. And so I had to go live with my aunt, and a lot of my siblings and my cousins, because my aunt had money, and you know, they were looking at me like I was the favorite person, but in all actuality, who wants to be separated from their siblings? Because I had to live with her in Gary, Indiana, which that was a culture shock right there, coming from a small town, moving to. But anyway, so yeah, so we've never really, you know, and me being a Cancer, I've always been the one trying to bring family together. And I still do that, but with that breaking apart, I am not responsible for that. You know, that's something that goes further. So, you know, yes, but now I don't feel like it's my responsibility.
Well, wonderful, because thank you for sharing that, because you know, many of us touched on some astrologer touched on the regulars, on the regal aspect, and on, you know, having very high expectations in general, and the fact that you were in that contrast between poverty and wealth, you know, you know, in this family that raised you, that had the means but originally no means. That speaks a lot about the, you know, these changes in your chart, and the queen quality, and so that's important to know. Thank you for sharing that. Any last questions from the astrologers? Do you want to confirm anything?
Well, I don't know. I really do like the career part, but I was hoping I'd hear more about getting married or something. But, you know, I guess that's all down the line.
I think the overreaching conclusion is whether, you know, each of us mentioned a different timing. You know, some of us mentioned it may be more immediate. Some of us say next, you know, towards 2020, 2021. But it seems like it shouldn't conflict each other. You know, that seems to be the overreaching message. And it's not so much about career or family, but it's about having a partner that can understand who you are and where you're at. And so someone who will not be intimidated by your knowledge and by your capacities and occupations.
Yeah, that's been a theme. I have Eris on my ascendant also, which I hear that can attract, you know, some partners that might, you know, might be jealous or just might be in competition. Yeah.
Well, that works with Venus in Leo as well sometimes. So thank you so much, Ursa. And as we mentioned, this was concise. If you are interested in exploring this further, you will read the reports in the Career Astrologer magazine. Of course, I will also share the screen here. Where is it? If you would like more information about these analysis, about these different perspectives, check the websites. And we hope, you know, and we hope that we will have more of these events and explore more of what astrology's diversity can offer. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ursa.
Thank you.
I hope we can follow up. I said about 10% of the stuff I want to share with you.
I mean, God, everything was so interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Maurice. Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
And
Thank you, Ursa.
Happy Astrology Day, everyone.
Yes. Happy Astrology Day.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.